But yeah, you guys begin your night's rest. It's meager accommodations. As I said, not utterly ruined. It's at the very least some amount of shelter, but it's certainly not ideal. Man, you guys set your camp in these this abandoned farmhouse.
Uh, Ode, if this is an alright time since we have a little bit of daylight left before it gets too dark. And Byron, too. You guys want to try to. I think we're getting close to the end of the book.
Sure, sounds good.
Alright, then Artuk would, sort of find a place that's not terribly uncomfortable for three people to sit, and then, sit down and start going through like we've been doing, which is sort of, Artuk helps with the druidic parts that are just sort of symbols and, things that wouldn't have meaning to a normal person that he understands, and then the two of them, and with the little bit he's got, Byron helping along the way, get through the common that sort of bridges the parts that are druidic.
Okay.
And I believe Ode's helping because she can cast comprehend languages. So
She's
she's
the only
been
one
doing
that can
that.
read both.
Yeah.
Okay. As you begin to go through it, first things you immediately pick up on is that this book it's old, not ancient. It's not millennia, but it's older. It's definitely over 100 years old. Shockingly well kept, but still a little on the fragile side.
Sure.
It is written by someone named Idion the Tracker. Ode, could you make a history check for me?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, as
With
you
the
go
20.
through it, Idion the Tracker, they're kind of a Lewis and Clark esque figure from about 150 years ago. They basically went west and began to kind of just explore more of the world, kind of begin to put a proper map together of the world. They were a cartographer, an explorer, an adventurer, pretty much all those titles under the sun. And they are relatively well received as far as they were very detailed about kind of taking things down. So you get the sense this is a at least semi-reliable source. What specifically are you guys looking for in the book? Are there any like specific questions that you are trying to focus on?
Well, I know we've been kind of reading the whole book, so you had described one chapter to me before. So do you kind of want to describe like what the general overall book looks like, or like the contents are, like in a general sense? So we have
Yeah,
that.
and then if I have like
That's
if we
a
have
good idea.
specific questions, like if there's any info on those questions we have. Otherwise, just sort of generally what each chapter is saying.
Sure thing. So it's written as the account of Idion the Tracker as they are going around and exploring a phenomena called the Blight that just seemed to appear and kind of tracking its mythology, its effect, its both the myth and the reality of it. It seemed like they at some point learned about whatever the Blight was and started going to affected areas, affected peoples to trying to piece together what precisely it was, what it affected, how much of it was real and how much of it was exaggerated. Immediately going through, you get the sense that he determined, yes, it is real, and it seems to, and just the general nature, he seemed to, over the course of time, kind of piece together what you guys already know just from dealing with Artuk, just death stalks around those who are affected. It manifests and it grows more powerful over time. And the part that, oh, you read specifically is that a very common solution to this was for druidic circles that are interacting with this was to kill whomever it was that was affected. It wasn't it was a semi-known thing. It was almost like kind of the myth of the Wendigo to give a frame of reference. It's not as though it's like we all know that we druidic circles all know and share this kind of analytical knowledge so much as we all know of the legend of a Blightwalker, and the general consensus is to kill them before their death can spread.
So, is it popping up in the book that Blightwalkers seem to appear in druidic circles, or can appear, like, in cities, too?
It definitely seems more focused on druidic circles.
Okay.
It seems to be that regardless of... There are some accounts of, as they discuss, druids that sometimes are... or druids or those who are affected sometimes are affected by this and are then killed. Sometimes they run away, and that effect can leach out. There's just scattered reports from farmers of crops that were incredibly healthy suddenly withering into nothingness, getting into towns, and just the report of like a guard from like 30 years prior recounting, oh yeah, that guy who was just carried this weird aura about him, we ran him out of town, or there was a lynch mob or something in town, things of that nature. It seems like this account is always based on second or third hand accounts. It never directly addressed someone who was affected by it because they were either dead or hidden away.
So Idian never talked to a Blightwalker, and there's no accounts of like an interview with a Blightwalker essentially here.
Not immediately. Not as you go through it.
Does it ever go over like how it started, like even just the mythology behind that? Like with Wendigos, kind of pulling off of your same idea, like the whole idea with the Wendigos that they were a cannibal, so they got this curse. Is there anything like that for this?
It does go into the myth. A lot of it is not dismissed outright, but definitely not applicable to Artuk. It's druids who betrayed their circle in some way. That's kind of what several of them say. So they defiled a grove or destroyed it, for instance. They made a pact with a city out of greed to get something. Basically, the betrayal of nature. There's others that go through of it's just a natural force of death that manifests. Others say that it is this kind of... it's this malevolent force that travels around and particularly affects people to spread death. Idian, though, as you go through it, you notice that there seems like a lot of this, as I said, is kind of secondhand accounts recounting, and there's often a kind of summary at the end of Idian's thoughts. It's a bit pretentious when you read through it the first time, but you get used to it. You note that he kind of remarks that whatever it is, it seems that whatever mythology is twisted and there aren't a lot of clear answers. And this seems to have been going on this book is about 150 years old, centuries even before then. So identifying a specific root cause is very difficult.
Sure. As we're going through and those accounts are coming up, I'm also going to keep a keen eye out for anything that in any of the accounts could be interpreted as the oracle or the woman that I've been seeing in my dreams, if she's recurring at all or if she's unique to me.
The oracle from your dreams or the woman Ashira you were told to fetch?
Specifically either. Like, that is to say one or the other. There
is, in some of the ways to kind of how to combat it, there is talk of sometimes a grove would not necessarily kill the person, they would exile them. And often those exiles would be told, seek, like, elder knowledge. Seek those who have traversed the plains. Seek those who have attuned to nature even beyond the grove's capabilities. Those who breathe life and understand the balance. It's nothing specific, but kind of the wider consultation of those with kind of elder magic, like the more ancient druidic magics. You go through, and it kind of see that. You do eventually see, though, towards the end, Idian refer to a very particular tribe from the. One second, I'm trying to remember my own map. Sorry, could you repeat that?
That was going to be my next question if you brought up any specific tribes.
A tribe far to the south, into kind of the elven forests that Idian somehow managed to make contact with, and they also knew of this, and they simply referred to one called the Wild as kind of a means of seeking purification. Beyond that, it's a little tricky to find specific answers.
Sure. In any of the accounts, did any of the afflicted seem to? Was there any other talk of a similar situation to Artuk where they came to some level of control or not symbiosis, but near symbiosis with the Blight itself, or was it always a dominating and destroying force in every single account?
You know it's a dominating, destroying force, but you also are realizing as you go through, a lot of this is secondhand. So it's always written by the grove that exiled them, the farmers that talked about death stalking. So that one's a little harder to tell on whether it's never happened or whether it's just biased accounting.
Yep, that makes sense. All right. Out of curiosity, is there any mention of a Blight Walker ever from the forests that I'm from before me? Because I think to myself and note to myself that the Elder knew of this.
There is indeed.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, there is. How deep are you going to try to dig into that particular kernel? But you do notice, and you, having gotten your kind of world knowledge more developed, you know that your specific woods, your tribe isn't the right word. I can't remember what you've used.
Herd is what I used.
Your herd is not referenced by name because that just isn't kind of the nature of it, but that region, and it makes a specific note of like the idea of a very carefully managed population. You feel very confident referring to it, and you see in this one a specific mention of someone who was affected by it probably 3-4 centuries prior to you guys now. So 400 years ago. Wait, no. 200 years ago. Sorry, jumping time. 200 years ago, leaving and heading west.
West. Okay, so like, well, west of where it's like southwest, so that like past Capra and out into the swamps, almost towards Cathartis.
It
straight
says
west would just be the
it
ocean.
says west, and you notice a few notes on it that seem to make reference to, once again, this one was, they tried to kill them. They tried to kill them, and they fled in a manner not dissimilar to you. But it seemed as though the herd was of the opinion they would either die out there, or more likely they were trying to find some way to become purified.
Gotcha.
But they distinctly mention that they headed west, and they chased them down for a while, but just the natural blight harmed some members of the herd such that they recoiled because they didn't think they could catch up.
Gotcha. No specific like misdirection or anything. It was just the blight effects. I wouldn't think of any how I had interference in my escape.
Hard to tell. It seems like it's just, again, hard to answer that knowledge from secondhand accounts.
Gotcha. All right. Is there anything else super notable in here, or is that? I mean, that's a lot already. I'm happy for it.
As you do close the book, though, you do see one final account. It's written probably 10 years. It's specifically noted as being written like several years after the fact, after the rest of it. It seems like Idian must have come back to it, and it just kind of speaks to a lead. And as it reads, it says, through my studies and adventures, I have identified an individual of particular note. A sage, a guardian, I'm not sure of their exact role, but they seem, by all accounts, remarkably powerful. One known as a Shira. It is my belief that they reside far to the west of the world. I'm not sure whether on Akelia, whether towards Katra or Hawk's Summit, but I will be making my way there. I leave this journal in the hands of the Cerulean Eye in hopes that this may be preserved for some time. If I am successful, I intend to return and provide a further retelling of my tales. If that is not the case, I wish those who follow after me good luck. End.
All right. That was a lot.
Yeah. David, with a 20 history, and I don't know if you all were so fortuitous at your school, but my school, elementary and middle school growing up, would do that thing where they would hire these people who must tour around the country and do little historical plays. Because I just distinctly remember like a Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea, like really boring, random, like educational play, like going to that when I was in elementary school. So I like to think that Ode saw one of these for this person, if he's like a Lewis and Clark analog. Would Ode know what race this explorer was?
Half elven.
Half elven. Okay.
That's why you could live so long.
But yeah, I'll say Ode because of that. You distinctly remember that this particular individual is a bit of a Lewis and Clark figure, so there is that kind of show, just the romanticized version of the tales and kind of just traveled around. And you're sensing that maybe that particular history was a bit whitewashed, much like a lot of history, but, you know, they got most of it right. Half-elf adventurer who traveled the world and kind of mapped it and did the best to provide knowledge. Not a figurehead in this Cerulean Eye, but a respected fellow. You're noticing a lot more just dirty jokes and just a lot of frustration in this journal that maybe didn't get to the rest of the history books.
Okay, that makes sense.
Ode, if you know about this guy, do you know how the story ends? If the story is ended?
Well, let me think. I guess if this was written 100 years ago, and then David, what does Ode know if this guy is alive?
Roll history.
Or like at least like.
Would my previous 20 count?
I don't think so, because this is a different question.
Okay, 9.
Adventure from 100 years ago. I don't think that was Ode's exact area of focus. So, like, you know that he adventured for a very long time. But, like, towards the middle of his life was where a lot of discoveries were made, and it kind of fizzled out towards the end. So, not exactly sure. There might be a record.
Ode will kind of like scratch the back of her head uncomfortably and be like, actually, that was kind of one of the more boring plays they took us to when we were kids at the monastery, like one of those educational ones. So, no.
That's all right. I mean, you know, this is already, thank you guys so much, more info than I ever had. You know, I wasn't even sure leaving originally when I ran away if this was something that had ever happened to anybody else before, and now, you know, I'm really sure that it happens all the time to lots of different people, and that I'm not the only one ever who found it. And I know, you know, a couple of different leads towards where I could be headed. And actually, strange as it sounds, I've told you before, being prodded and helped along the way, and towards figuring this out. And, I was given a message to go and seek Ashira, and now I know that that's maybe the force that could help me out here by this last note. There's also this.
Yeah, it seems like this kind of corroborates that following that message would be heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, the big notes to take from this is I'm already doing the right things, and also I'm not alone, which is a kind of big thing. I wonder if there's anybody else out there in the world like me right now. You know, I'm not the only one or anything like that, or if it's like one at a time, or, you know, anything like that.
Regarding that, actually, I meant to give this particular note. It seems like the discovery of the Blight happens... He noticed, like, this is about when it showed up. Roughly speaking, it's usually several decades between each. Not like, oh, every 20 years on the full moon, so much as there seems like time and then a new one appears. You're not sure whether it's like one dies and it passes to the next or anything like that, but...
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions left, but at least, you know, I know A, I'm not the only one, B, I'm going the right way, C, the wild thing to the south is completely new to me. I've never heard of this before at all, and maybe I'll ask Ashira about it, or even if I have another dream, I might ask about it at some point. I don't really get to choose when I talk to her, though. She kind of picks when she thinks it's useful. It's really speaking in riddles all the time, which is confusing, but I understand it's how it has to happen for some reason.